You know, usually when someone talks about a life path or like finding your purpose, there is this underlying expectation that you're just going to be handed a map.
Right. Like a set of instructions.
Exactly. Think about it like a childhood treasure hunt, where the instructions are incredibly clear. You go to the right schools, you get the right entry-level job.
You check off all those major societal
Yeah,
boxes.
the marriage, the
Yeah.
mortgage, the aggressive retirement account. And the map implicitly promises that if you just keep your head down and follow that dashed line, you will eventually hit the big red X.
The destination.
Right. And standing right there on that X is supposed to be happiness. It's lasting fulfillment. I mean,
Uh-huh.
it's basically the societal equivalent of a doctor pointing at an X-ray and saying, there it is, right there in the image, you are officially successful.
It is a very linear, very safe way to conceptualize a life. And look, let's be honest about why that map exists in the first place. It is incredibly comforting to the human brain.
Because we like patterns.
Right. Exactly. We are neurologically wired to seek out predictable patterns because predictability historically meant survival. We like things to be laid out for us. That dashed line removes the immense cognitive load of having to invent your own trajectory from scratch every single morning.
Which sounds exhausting to do every day. But here is this scenario that throws a massive wrench into that whole machinery. What happens when you wake up one random morning? Maybe you are in your early 30s, maybe you're pushing 50, and you look down and you realize you were standing squarely on that red X.
You've arrived.
You did everything right. You followed the dashed line perfectly. But you look around and you just feel empty. There is no parade. There is no lasting fulfillment. Suddenly, that treasure map feels less like a helpful guide and a lot more like a highly orchestrated trap.
That is a harsh realization.
It is. And if you dare to step off the X, you are suddenly looking at a psychological landscape that is just terrifyingly bare.
And that is the precise friction point where an existential crisis is born. It is the jarring, often very painful moment when the promised external reward completely fails to match the internal reality of your experience.
The math just stops adding up.
Exactly. The math you were taught simply stops working.
And that terrifyingly bare landscape, that moment where the math stops working, is exactly what we are plunging into today. So today, we are taking a sledgehammer to that predefined map.
I love that. A sledgehammer.
We have to. We're exploring a radically disruptive collection of writings all centered around rejecting these pre-written societal scripts and figuring out the actual mechanics of manufacturing your very own meaning.
It's quite a shift.
It really is.
Yeah.
And these fascinating, deeply provocative excerpts come to us directly from a source known as Echoes from the Edge with the Lone Wolf.
Which is honestly a remarkably fitting title for this material. The texts we are going to dissect today, spanning sections called The Alchemy of Action, The Architecture of Autonomy, and The Sovereignty of Self-Defined Purpose, are not your standard, hyper-optimized productivity hacks.
Right. This isn't about waking up at 4 a.m. to be more productive.
Not at all. They are not offering you a new morning routine to squeeze out 10% more efficiency at a job you tolerate. This is a complete foundational teardown of modern existence. It is demanding that you examine the invisible scaffolding of your entire life.
Now, before we go any further, I do want to make one thing absolutely clear to you, the listener. As we dive into this material and talk about tearing down these societal structures and rejecting the script, we are here to impartially unpack the profound ideas presented in these specific texts.
We're acting as a lens, not an endorsement.
Exactly. We aren't endorsing them as gospel, and we certainly aren't telling you to walk into your boss's office today and flip your desk over.
Please don't do that.
Yeah, please don't. Our mission is simply to convey the psychological framework the authors built so you can examine it for yourself. We want to figure out how the text suggests breaking out of this cage of external validation, how to actually survive embracing the void, and ultimately how to become what the author calls unprogrammable.
Which is a fascinating concept, but to understand the escape, we first have to spend some serious time examining the prison itself. We have to talk about the pre-written script and this concept of conditional meaning.
You can't break out of a system you don't understand, right?
Right, precisely. You cannot dismantle a system if you are completely blind to its architecture. And the architecture of this particular system, as the text outlines it, is constructed entirely out of assigned conditional meaning.
Conditional meaning, but let's break that down.
Well, the argument made here is that from the moment you are born, you aren't handed intrinsic meaning. You are handed a script.
And I want to dig into how insidious that script actually is, because it's not presented as a choice. The text argues that from the moment you learn to speak and interact with the world, you are basically trained to just nod along with the premise.
You're rewarded for compliance.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
You go to school to get the grades, to get into the college, to get the degree, to get the job, to get the promotion. The success metrics are just fed to you constantly.
They are inescapable.
And the trap is that these paths are packaged and sold to you, not as a possible way to navigate human existence, but as the singular, definitive way to live correctly.
And modern society executes this with ruthless efficiency. I mean, it is a masterclass in assigning conditional meaning. If you break down the structures you inhabit every single day, you see it everywhere.
Where do we see it the most?
Look at careers. They don't just provide income. They come with elaborate hierarchies and titles that tell you your rank in the human pack.
Right, the VP versus the intern.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Then look at digital platforms. They provide immediate, quantifiable metrics, likes, follower counts, engagement rates that literally assign a numerical value to your thoughts and your appearance.
It's all tracked.
It is. And society at large hands you specific widget roles.
Yeah.
You are the provider, you are the caretaker, you are the successful entrepreneur, you are the loyal employee.
Okay, let's unpack this. So society is basically giving you a prepackaged identity.
It's giving you an identity, but more importantly, it is creating a powerful illusion of purpose by attaching your personal internal value to highly predefined external outcomes.
It's an equation.
Yes, it establishes a formula in your mind. Productivity equals worth. Visibility equals importance.
And compliance equals stability. If you play by the rules, the system will keep you safe.
Exactly. But the text identifies a fatal structural flaw in this entire setup. It draws a very hard line between actual meaning and what it defines simply as dependency.
Dependency. That's a strong word to use for a career or a role.
It is, but what's fascinating here is how the text explains it. The flaw is that this assigned meaning is incredibly fragile because it is purely conditional. It only exists as long as you remain within the specific system that defines it, and as long as you are successfully meeting its conditions.
Okay, let me see if I can ground this in a real-world scenario for the listener. Let's say you are a high-powered executive. You have spent 20 years climbing the corporate ladder.
You've given it your whole life.
Right. Your entire identity, the way you introduce yourself at parties, the way you measure your success, is entirely tied up in the title Vice President of Operations. If the company downsizes tomorrow and you are laid off, the text is saying you didn't just lose a paycheck.
No, the entire architecture of your identity collapses.
Wow, that is terrifying.
That is precisely the vulnerability. If you lose the platform, the validation disappears. If you lose the societal role, the purpose dissolves.
Because it wasn't yours to begin with.
Right. The text makes this incredibly sharp observation that I think is vital to internalize. That setup is not meaning, that is dependency. You are entirely dependent on an external system to grant you permission to feel valuable, to tell you that you exist, and to confirm that you matter.
It's like you're renting your self-worth.
Yes.
Yeah.
You are renting your self-worth from an entity that can evict you at any given time.
I want to use an analogy here to really visualize what you are describing. It feels like being dropped into a massive multiplayer video game.
Okay, I like this.
You log in, and immediately you see these glowing arrows on the floor. And because everyone else is running in the direction of the arrows, you just blindly start following them. The arrows lead you to quests, and when you complete the quest, a little badge pops up on your screen.
You get that dopamine hit.
Exactly. You get a ping of dopamine. You level up, you play this game for hours, which turns into days, which turns into years. You are grinding away, sacrificing your real-world time and energy for these virtual trophies to get the higher-level armor, to get your name on the leaderboard.
You're completely invested in the metrics of the game.
Right. But you never, in all those years, actually pause to take your hands off the keyboard and ask yourself if you even like the mechanics of the game. You're just playing because the arrows are there, the objectives are clear, and the game reliably rewards you with a dopamine hit when you comply.
I think the neurobiology behind your video game analogy is actually spot on. I mean, the brain's dopamine system evolved to reward us for behaviors that promote survival, finding food, securing shelter, reproducing.
The basics.
The basics. But modern society has effectively hacked that ancient pathway. It has substituted gathering berries with getting a promotion or receiving 100 likes on a post.
We're hunting for engagement instead of food.
Exactly. You are mistaking the game's highly engineered extrinsic reward system for your own intrinsic internal fulfillment. The system is feeding you just enough dopamine to keep you on the treadmill, but never enough to actually satiate you.
Which brings us to a really fascinating observation in the source material from Echoes from the Edge with the Lone Wolf. The text points out that even when you are winning the game, even when you get the promotion, buy the house, hit the metrics, you often experience what it calls a quiet emptiness you can't explain.
Yes, that lingering feeling.
Now, usually when you achieve your goals and still feel miserable, the societal narrative is that you are the problem. You are broken.
You're ungrateful.
Right. You need to practice more gratitude, you need to go on a retreat, you need to talk to a professional, or you need to just hustle harder and get a different, better job. How does this text reframe that quiet emptiness?
It completely inverts the narrative. It argues that this feeling of quiet emptiness is not a malfunction of your psychology. It is not a failure.
So what is it?
The text describes this emptiness beautifully. It calls it awareness leaking through the cracks.
Oh, wow. Awareness leaking through the cracks. That is a striking phrase.
It is. It's your core, authentic self, temporarily waking up to the reality that the script is a hollow construction. It's the moment you realize the virtual trophy has no actual weight in the real world.
The moment the game glitches.
Exactly. And this is a crucial point in the text, the overarching societal framework of conditional meaning actively works to suppress that awareness.
Why? Why does it care?
Because the system, fundamentally, does not want builders. It wants participants. It requires your continuous, unquestioning participation to sustain itself.
So the system views that leaking awareness as an actual threat.
Absolutely, which is why the modern environment is so perfectly calibrated to numb it. The text suggests that the system thrives when you are medicated just enough to function through the friction, distracted just enough by constant stimuli, not to question the underlying structure.
And tired.
Yes, and physically and emotionally tired enough at the end of the day that you just don't have the energy to fight back or build an alternative.
When you lay it out like that, it's actually chilling. Look at the reality for so many people listening right now. We work incredibly demanding hours. We are utterly exhausted. And what do we do to decompress?
We scroll.
We sit on a couch and endlessly scroll through digital platforms that are algorithmically designed to hold our attention and feed us more conditional metrics. We are self-medicating with distraction just to cope with the baseline anxiety of existing within this framework.
The system is effectively patching its own cracks in real time.
It has to. Right. Because if that awareness fully broke through the cracks, if you sobered up from the distraction and fully realized you were exhausting your one and only life participating in a manufactured game that you didn't design and don't actually enjoy, you might stop playing.
You might log off entirely.
You might log off. And a system built on conditional meaning collapses the moment people stop valuing the conditions.
That is the ultimate fear of the system.
Okay, I am following the logic completely. The script is an illusion, the rewards are a trap, and the emptiness is actually our intuition trying to warn us. But this brings me to a massive contradiction.
Let's hear it.
If the script is so deeply unfulfilling, and if it leaves us with this quiet, gnawing emptiness, why do we cling to it so desperately? I mean, if the game is rigged and we know it's rigged, why don't we just tear up the map, turn off the screen, and walk away?
Because walking away introduces a terror far worse than the quiet emptiness.
Wait, worse than the emptiness?
Yes. This leads us directly into the psychology of self-entrapment, which is where the text introduces a heavyweight philosophical concept. It leans heavily into the existentialist Jean-Paul Sartre and his concept of bad faith.
Okay, Jean-Paul Sartre. Let's really dig into this because this is the moment in the deep dive where the text stops blaming society and turns the spotlight directly onto us. This is where it holds our feet to the fire.
It absolutely does. Sartre's concept of bad faith essentially deals with the phenomenon of self-deception.
Lying to ourselves.
Yes. The text is making the argument that we do not just passively accept the lie of the pre-written script because we are innocent victims of a brainwashing society. We actively, consciously choose the lie.
We choose to be trapped.
We embrace the script. And we choose it because the alternative, the actual truth of our existence, is incredibly inconvenient and demands a staggering amount of responsibility.
I am struggling a bit to see how someone actively chooses to be trapped. I mean, can you break down the mechanics of bad faith? How does that actually look in a normal person's life?
Think of it this way. Bad faith is when you lie to yourself about your own freedom to avoid the anxiety of having to make a choice.
Okay.
Sartre famously used the example of a waiter in a cafe who is moving a little too rigidly, acting a little too eagerly. He isn't just being a waiter, he is playing the role of a waiter.
He's acting out the script of what a waiter should be.
Exactly. He is suppressing his full humanity to perfectly embody a societal label because it's easier than dealing with the complexity of being a free human. The text applies this directly to the modern professional.
Give me an example.
It's the person who says, you know, I hate this corporate job. It's draining my soul, but I have no choice. I'm a middle manager. This is just what I do. This is who I am.
So they were treating their societal role as if it were a law of physics, like gravity.
Yes.
Like I can't float away and I can't quit my job. It's just the laws of nature.
Exactly. They are denying their own agency. And the text points out exactly why we do this. It says, responsibility is heavy. Think about what happens if you strip away the script. Think about the terror of the unwritten.
The terror of the unwritten.
If there is no pre-written purpose, if there is no inherent cosmic meaning to your specific career path, and no universal law that says you must live in the suburbs and climb the corporate ladder, then a terrifying realization hits you. Every single move you make is yours.
Because there's no track anymore. You're off-roading.
You are completely off-roading, and that means every failure is entirely yours. Every wasted year is yours. Every misstep is on your shoulders. You have no scapegoat anymore. You can no longer look at your life and say, well, I just did what society told me to do. I followed the rules.
Oh, wow. The script is basically an insurance policy against blame.
That is a perfect way to put it.
If I follow the map and I end up miserable, I can blame the map maker. I can blame the economy. I can blame my boss. I can blame my parents for pressuring me to take a safe major in college. I am completely insulated from the ultimate responsibility of my own unhappiness.
You're safe from yourself.
But if I tear up the script and decide to write my own story, I am the sole author. And if the book turns out to be terrible, it is 100% my fault. That is a paralyzing amount of pressure.
It is paralyzing. And that realization, as the text explicitly states, terrifies most people into submission. So confronted with the dizzying reality of absolute freedom and absolute responsibility, what do?
They run back to the game.
They retreat. They run back to the systems, the jobs, the predefined labels. They adopt these off-the-shelf identities because they feel incredibly safe. The rules are clear. The expectations are set.
They choose bad faith.
They willingly choose bad faith. They look in the mirror and lie, saying, this is just how life is. I have to do this, because actually claiming their freedom would mean owning their existence.
Here is where it gets really interesting, though. I hear everything you were saying, and I understand the philosophy. But I need to push back here on behalf of the listener, because this feels a bit disconnected from biological reality.
How so?
Well, isn't it just fundamental human nature to seek safety? I mean, we are literally wired by millions of years of evolution to avoid danger, to stay with the tribe, and to seek shelter. I'm trying to picture this practically.
Okay.
Think about a hermit crab. A hermit crab finds a shell, and it lives inside it for protection. As the crab grows, the shell becomes much too small. It becomes restrictive, uncomfortable, maybe even agonizingly tight.
Right.
But the hermit crab will often refuse to abandon that shell until it absolutely has to, simply because the idea of being exposed, soft, and vulnerable in the open ocean is a literal death sentence.
The ocean is dangerous.
The open ocean is full of predators. The tight shell might be painful, but it guarantees survival. Are we just doing the exact same thing? We stay in the restrictive job, the restrictive identity, because the open ocean of absolute freedom is just too dangerous.
It is a very fair critique, and it acknowledges a deeply ingrained survival instinct. We crave the armor. We want the shell. But the text anticipates this exact biological defense mechanism.
And how does it respond?
It answers it with a very stark, very uncompromising fracture point. It states simply, safety is not truth.
Safety is not truth, meaning the shell might keep you alive, but it's a lie to say it's who you are.
Right. The text concedes that you can absolutely choose the armor. You can choose the agonizingly tight shell of the predefined label. But if you do, you have to consciously accept that you are living a lie, and you forfeit the right to complain about the quiet emptiness.
You can't have it both ways.
Exactly. But the philosophy goes much deeper than just calling out the lie. To counter your hermit crab analogy, the text pivots to a profound revelation about what it calls stillness.
Stillness. How does the text define that?
It describes a specific, quiet moment that almost everyone experiences, but we rarely discuss openly. This realization doesn't happen during the chaotic noise of the workday or when you're distracted by your phone. It happens in the absolute stillness.
I know exactly what you mean. It's that moment staring at the ceiling at 3 a.m. when the house is entirely quiet and your brain stops buzzing for just a second.
Yes, the 3 a.m. clarity. And in that stillness, the illusion drops and you realize something terrifying but liberating. Nothing is actually holding your life together except your active participation in it.
Wait, expand on that. What do you mean nothing is holding it together?
Think about the structures you feel trapped by, the job, the social obligations, the identity. In that stillness, you realize there is no actual invisible structure enforcing them.
There are no guards at the door.
There are no physical chains. The ground beneath you isn't solid rock, it's a societal agreement. At first, realizing that all these vital structures are just concepts feels incredibly destabilizing. It induces vertigo.
I can imagine.
But then, the psychological shift happens. If nothing is actually holding you, then nothing is binding you either.
Oh, wow. That completely reframes the whole situation.
That job you hate and feel chained to, it's a choice you are making every single morning when you set your alarm.
Right.
That identity you carry that feels so heavy, a choice. That narrative you keep repeating to yourself about who you are and what you are capable of achieving, it's just a story you chose to memorize.
You aren't trapped by an invisible, omnipotent system.
No. The text's ultimate revelation is that you are the one standing there, holding your own cage door closed.
That utterly dismantles my hermit crab analogy. It's not that the open ocean is full of literal predators and we need the shell to survive. It's that we have convinced ourselves the shell is super glued to our backs, when in biological and psychological reality, we can just walk out of it at any second.
You're funding your own prison.
We are maintaining our own captivity. We are funding our own prison because we are terrified of the exposure that comes with freedom.
And the overarching system thrives precisely on that illusion of permanence. It desperately wants you to believe that your current state is fixed, that the shell is glued on, and that attempting to change is inherently risky, irresponsible, or foolish.
Because if you figured it out, you'd leave.
Because if you truly internalize the fluid, constructed nature of your own existence, you would become dangerous.
Dangerous to who?
That's the critical distinction. Not dangerous to other people. The text is very clear that this isn't about anarchy or harming society.
Yeah.
You become dangerous to stagnation.
To the status quo.
Yes. You become a direct threat to the inertia of the system because you prove that the rules are optional.
Okay, so let's walk through the hypothetical. Let's say a listener is lying in bed tonight at 3 a.m. They experience that stillness. They realize they are holding the cage door closed.
The realization hits.
And they decide, right then and there, to just let go. They let the heavy door swing open and they step out of the cage. What actually happens next? Because according to these texts from Echoes from the Edge with the Lone Wolf, you aren't stepping out of the cage into a beautiful sunny meadow where everything is easy.
Far from it.
The text says you are stepping into the void. So how does a human mind survive that level of exposure without snapping?
This brings us to perhaps the most confrontational, unvarnished part of the philosophy. It demands that we look directly, without blinking, at what it calls the indifferent expanse.
The indifferent expanse.
It strips away all spiritual or cosmic safety nets and states unequivocally that the universe does not answer, it does not explain, it does not justify, and it does not care.
So there's no grand plan. It's just silent.
Absolute silence. And you have to understand the psychological shock of that. For someone who has spent 30 years inside the comfort of a pre-written script, where every action had a designated purpose, a grade, or a metric, stepping into a vast space where nothing inherently matters is staggering.
It's like having the floor drop out from under you.
It induces a kind of psychological bends. Most people look at that silence, they look at that void, and they immediately label it meaningless. They conclude that existence is a cruel joke, and they fall into a deep, paralyzing despair.
I can completely understand why, though. I mean, if you've been told your whole life that your worth is tied to achieving X, and suddenly you realize X is a fiction and the universe doesn't care if you achieve it or not, the immediate logical leap is, well, then what is the point of anything?
Right. Why bother?
Why even get out of bed on a Tuesday?
It sounds like the text is pushing a worldview of pure, bleak nihilism. Is this entire philosophy just an argument for nihilism?
That is the trap, and it's a trap many philosophers have fallen into. It is very easy to read the phrase, the universe does not care, and stop your analysis right there.
The text goes further.
Much further.
Yeah.
The text argues that concluding the void is simply meaningless is a lazy conclusion. It's a failure of imagination. This is where we see the most profound psychological flip in the entire source material.
Okay, what's the flip? The text says, because if nothing matters, then everything is available.
Let me process that. If nothing matters, everything is available. That changes the entire polarity of the argument. It takes it from a negative to a positive.
Completely. It flips the void from a vacuum that sucks away meaning into a space of infinite potential. Think about the mechanics of a cage.
Yeah.
A cage defines what you cannot do. It has walls. It has doors that lock.
Right.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the void doesn't just open a door. The void means there are no walls anymore. In that open, radically silent space, every direction you might want to walk, every possibility you might want to explore, every identity you haven't dared to step into because it wasn't on the script is suddenly entirely accessible to you.
I think I have an analogy for this. It's the profound difference between staring at a terrifyingly massive, completely blank canvas versus staring at a restrictive paint-by-numbers board.
That's a great way to visualize it.
Right. The script we were handed at birth, the map, is a paint-by-numbers. It tells you exactly what colors to put in exactly which shapes. Number 2 is blue, number 5 is green.
It does the thinking for you.
It's incredibly easy, you don't have to think, and you know exactly what the picture will look like at the end. But the tragedy is, you didn't really create it. You just filled in the blanks.
You just executed the instructions.
But when you step out of the cage and into the void, you are suddenly staring at a canvas that is hundreds of feet tall and completely blindingly blank. There are no numbers. There are no outlines. There is no instructor telling you what to paint.
Just you and the canvas.
And yes, a blank canvas of that size can cause immense anxiety. It triggers that terror of the unwritten we talked about. But it is also the ultimate form of optimism, isn't it? Because for the first time in your life, you can paint absolutely anything.
That is exactly the shift the text is trying to provoke. It moves the reader from the paralysis of nihilism to the ultimate state of empowerment. The realization here is that an indifferent universe is not a punishment. It is a permission slip.
The permission slip. I love that.
Because the universe doesn't care what you do, you no longer need its approval to do it. You don't need society's permission. You don't need the algorithm's permission. In that silent blank space, you are left with one fundamental binary decision.
What are the two choices?
You have two choices. You either let the silence crush you and you fade into the background noise, or you decide to become the signal.
Fade into the noise or become the signal. So what does this all mean functionally?
Well, the text uses this beautiful, defiant imagery. It says, you must build your fire against the void. You don't build it because the universe requires warmth. You don't build it because society will give you an award for the best fire.
You're not doing it for a grade.
Exactly. You build it simply because you, as a sovereign individual, chose to burn anyway. Your fire does not need permission to exist. It validates itself.
Fire against the void. It's incredibly poetic, and it feels very empowering. But I have to be honest, it brings up a massive, highly practical problem for the listener.
Let's get practical then.
Okay, let's say I've done the mental work. I've left the cage. I recognize the bad faith. I am standing in the void, holding my paintbrush, staring at the blank canvas. I want to build a fire. I want to become the signal. But I have absolutely no idea what to do.
You lack a destination.
Entirely. My entire life, the script told me what my passion should be, what my major should be, what my career should be. If the canvas is completely blank, how on earth do you figure out what to paint? I don't have a destination anymore.
And the text's answer to that specific, terrifying paralysis is brutal in its simplicity. The answer is you don't know. You will not know. You just have to start.
Wait, hold on. You just start blindly, without a plan, without knowing what the end product is going to look like.
Yes, and this brings us directly into the section of the material titled The Alchemy of Action. This section begins by ruthlessly deconstructing something it calls the myth of clarity.
A myth of clarity. I think every single person listening to this right now has fallen victim to this trap at least once.
It's universal.
It's the deeply held belief that we need to have the entire journey figured out, mapped, and risk assessed before we take the very first step.
Exactly. And it is the most common reason people die with their potential unfulfilled. Too many people sit safely on the edge of their own lives, endlessly waiting.
Waiting for what, exactly?
They are waiting for the perfect, foolproof business plan. They are waiting for the exact right timing in the market. They are waiting for a guaranteed outcome before they commit their energy. They demand the complete architectural blueprint before they are willing to pour a single ounce of concrete for the foundation.
But the text says certainty is the one thing this world will never, ever provide.
Never. The universe does not deal in guarantees. And because people wait for a state of certainty that is mathematically impossible to achieve, they stall. They freeze in the void.
They just stand there holding the paintbrush.
Yes. The text paints a very sad but statistically common reality. It says years pass, opportunities fade. The grand idea of someday slowly metastasizes into a quiet regret.
Oof. That hits close to home. Someday I'll write that book. Someday I'll quit this job and start that bakery. Someday I'll move to the mountains like I've always wanted.
It's always someday.
And someday is really just a psychologically protective way of saying never without having to grieve the loss of the dream today.
Because you are waiting for a clarity that does not exist prior to action. And this is the core functional thesis of the alchemy of action. The text argues that we have the sequence completely backward.
How so?
Clarity does not come first. Action comes first. You do not need all the answers to begin, you only need movement.
Action generates direction, not the other way around.
Precisely. The instruction is to start building something, anything. It just has to be a reflection of what you actually think, what you actually feel, or what you genuinely believe outside of the script.
So it doesn't have to be a masterpiece.
Not at all. You write the messy first chapter, you record the terrible first podcast, you speak the uncomfortable truth, you share the weird hobby, and let's be clear, it won't be perfect. In fact, it is guaranteed to be flawed.
But that doesn't matter.
The text argues that the quality of the initial output is irrelevant. The sheer physical act of creating and moving is what begins to generate the directional feedback you are looking for.
This is so radically countercultural. I mean, we live in an era that is completely obsessed with optimization. We want 10-year plans, we want life hacks, we want to read 15 reviews before we buy a toaster.
We want to eliminate all risk.
Yes, we are conditioned to research everything to death before we make a move. But the text is essentially saying that this endless research phase is mostly just sophisticated procrastination disguised as productivity.
It's bad faith making a comeback. It's a very clever way of avoiding the responsibility of actually doing the thing, being perceived by others, and potentially failing in the real world.
Let's try to find an analogy for this mechanic, because I really want the listener to grasp how action creates direction. It's so important.
Go for it.
It's like imagine driving a car at night in incredibly heavy fog. You're in the driver's seat, you can't see more than 3 feet in front of the hood.
You're completely blind to the destination.
Exactly. The myth of clarity tells you to park the car on the side of the road and wait for the fog to completely lift so you can see the entire route all the way to your destination before you press the gas pedal. But we know the fog might never lift.
So you just sit there forever.
Right. But the alchemy of action tells you to turn on your headlights and just ease forward 5 feet at a time. The movement itself illuminates the next 5 feet of the road. You can't see the destination, but the action of driving reveals the path in real time. The movement creates the clarity.
That is a phenomenal analogy, and it perfectly encapsulates the mechanism the text is describing. The action, the messy draft, the awkward conversation, the new project that is moving forward in the fog. It hits reality, and reality pushes back.
And that pushback is the feedback.
Yes.
Wow.
That friction tells you what works and what doesn't. You adjust your trajectory based on the reality of the road. The text actually uses a similar metaphor, leaning into the concept of the signal we discussed earlier.
How does it tie into the signal?
It states, every step you take cuts through the static. Every decision you make, regardless of the outcome, strengthens your signal.
So instead of sitting paralyzed in the void waiting for a divine thunderbolt of inspiration to reveal your life's ultimate purpose, you just strike a tiny match.
Just a spark.
It might just be a small spark at first. A Saturday morning hobby, a deep conversation with a stranger, a tiny side project that makes absolutely no money, but that little spark is your signal. It's your headlights in the fog.
Yes. And over time, as you iterate, as you keep taking actions and making decisions that align with your internal truth rather than the external pre-written script, that signal becomes louder. It becomes undeniable.
And it becomes undeniable not because society approves.
Exactly. It becomes undeniable not because the overarching system suddenly approves of it. In fact, the system might actively try to suppress it.
Yeah.
But it becomes undeniable because you simply refuse to stop building it. Your consistency becomes its own justification.
This brings us to a recurring, almost poetic motif in the source material that I found absolutely fascinating. Throughout these texts, the author keeps referencing a specific day of the week.
Yes, Thursday.
They keep talking about Thursday. The text will say things like, Thursday is where that cycle ends, or Thursday is where the illusion cracks. And Thursday isn't for that version of you. I want to unpack this. Why Thursday? What is the psychological significance of Thursday in this framework?
Thursday is utilized here as a highly grounded, powerful metaphor for the breaking point. It represents that precise, violent moment of awakening we talked about earlier, the 3 a.m. realization, but dragged out into the harsh, fluorescent light of a mundane weekday.
So it's not a romantic realization.
Not at all. The author chose Thursday very deliberately because Thursday is deeply, inextricably entrenched in the middle of the grind.
It's like the most unremarkable day of the week.
Exactly. Think about the psychology of the typical work week. Monday carries a false momentum. It's the start of a news cycle. Maybe you have a little adrenaline or caffeine-fueled optimism.
Sure, you rested from the weekend.
Tuesday and Wednesday are just pure inertia. You just push through. Friday offers the psychological relief of imminent escape. You can endure Friday because the weekend is right there.
You can see the finish line.
But Thursday is the absolute depths of the routine. The adrenaline of Monday is completely gone, and the escape of Friday is still just a bit too far away to provide any real relief. Thursday is the raw, unfiltered reality of the loop you are stuck in.
It's the day you are most deeply embedded in the script. You're exhausted, you're sitting in traffic or staring at a spreadsheet, and you are just desperately trying to survive the next 24 hours.
And that is exactly why the text argues that Thursday is where the illusion cracks. Not on a beautiful mountaintop retreat, not softly, not politely. The illusion cracks under the sheer accumulated weight of the mundane.
It just snaps.
It cracks violently enough to finally wake you up. The text is saying that Thursday is for the version of you that is absolutely, definitively done pretending. It's the moment your tolerance for bad faith runs out entirely.
It's the moment you can't lie to yourself anymore.
Yes. It is the day you decide to stop waiting for clarity, stop relying on conditional meaning, and actually start moving. Thursday is the day you strike the match.
I love the visceral nature of that. Thursday is for the version of you that is done pretending. It grounds this very lofty philosophy right in the middle of a miserable morning commute.
It makes it incredibly accessible.
Okay, so let's cross that bridge. Let's talk about the aftermath. What happens after your Thursday? What happens to your relationship with the rest of society once you actually start generating your own signal, taking action, and driving in the fog?
This is a critical transition.
Because you have essentially unplugged, right? You are no longer playing the massive multiplayer game. You are completely ignoring the glowing arrows. How does the world react to that?
This is where we reach the practical culmination of the deep dive, exploring the realities of becoming what the author calls unprogrammable. To understand this state, we have to look closely at the shift from dependency to self-created meaning.
We discussed dependency at the very beginning, the vulnerability of needing the job title, the societal role, or the digital metrics just to feel like you have value.
Right. Well, once you experience your Thursday, once you embrace the void and begin building your fire in the dark through the alchemy of action, you undergo a fundamental, irreversible psychological shift.
You break the dependency.
You stop outsourcing your sense of purpose to external systems. You stop looking at the scoreboard to see if you are winning. Instead, you begin generating meaning entirely from within. This is self-created meaning. And self-created meaning operates on a completely different, much more robust framework than assigned meaning.
Break down the mechanics of that robustness. Why is self-created meaning so much stronger than the conditional meaning society hands us?
Because it is totally decoupled from external conditions. Self-created meaning does not require an audience to validate it. It doesn't require applause, it doesn't require a paycheck, and it doesn't require a title.
It just exists.
It just exists. And most importantly, because it isn't tethered to those external things, it does not collapse when the external conditions inevitably change. If you lose the job, or the platform changes its algorithm, or society shifts its expectations, your self-created meaning remains completely intact.
Because it wasn't built on their land.
Exactly. Because the job or the platform was never the source of your meaning. It was merely a temporary venue where you happened to be expressing it.
Ah, I see. The fire burns with the exact same heat regardless of what room you put it in. The room doesn't make the fire.
Precisely. The fuel source is entirely internal now. But this shift raises a very real, very challenging question regarding how society, which is still running entirely on conditional meaning, views people who operate this way.
I bet they don't like it.
The text observes that independent thinkers, people who have generated their own robust signal, often appear profoundly disconnected from mainstream systems.
I can absolutely see how that happens. I mean, if you are at a networking event and everyone else is frantically obsessing over the glowing arrows, trying to figure out who has the highest title, who has the most followers, who is winning the game, and you are just quietly sitting there, completely uninterested in their metrics because you are building something in the dark that doesn't earn you any points in their game.
They're not going to understand you.
People are going to think you are arrogant.
No.
They are going to think you are crazy, or at the very least that you are completely lost.
They will project their own anxiety onto you. They will assume you are lost because you aren't using their map. But the text provides a crucial clarification. These individuals are not lost. They are simply operating on a self-defined framework.
They're navigating by a different compass.
They have built a bespoke compass.
Okay.
It is a framework where value is self-defined, not externally assigned. However, you have to realize that to the overarching system and to the people who have heavily invested their entire identities into the script, this kind of unbothered, independent person is deeply threatening.
I understand why. Because if you don't care about the game's rewards, the game has absolutely zero leverage over you.
Exactly. You are immune.
A boss can't threaten you with a demotion if you genuinely don't care about the prestige of the title. A social circle can't threaten you with exile if you don't value their specific brand of conditional validation. You become completely immune to the carrot and the stick.
You become a variable they cannot control. You become dangerous. The text explicitly says you become dangerous not to others, to stagnation.
To stagnation.
By simply existing, by quietly operating on your own self-generated meaning without apologizing for it, you expose the extreme fragility of the script.
Yeah.
You are walking, breathing proof that the cage door is, in fact, unlocked.
And that bothers the people still inside.
It makes the people who are still sitting inside the cage complaining about the tight fit incredibly uncomfortable.
It forces them to confront their own bad faith. They can no longer say, everyone has to live in the cage, because there you are, walking around outside of it. It's the ultimate culminating promise of the text, really. There's a line that gave me actual chills when I read it.
Which line?
It says, you build your fire in the dark, and here's the truth they don't want you to realize. Once you do, you stop needing them.
It is the ultimate expression of liberation. When you build your own fire, you break the neurological and psychological feedback loop of external validation. You no longer need the system to tell you that you exist or that your existence matters.
And once you break that loop, once you sever that dependency, you become completely, fundamentally unprogrammable. The script cannot be uploaded into your brain anymore.
You reject the code.
The societal malware of conditional meaning is permanently blocked by your internal firewall.
Yeah.
You are sovereign.
The sovereignty of self-defined purpose.
Right.
That is the destination of this entire philosophical journey. It is moving from a programmable participant to an unprogrammable creator.
This has been a massive, intense journey today. Let's take a second to trace the arc of what we've unpacked, because we have covered incredible psychological ground. We started by examining how we blindly internalize the script handed to us at birth, the comforting illusion of the dashed line, and the severe vulnerability of attaching our identities to conditional meaning.
We looked at how society hacks our dopamine to keep us participating.
We then confronted why we stay trapped, utilizing Sartre's concept of bad faith to understand that we often actively choose the lie. We choose the heavy armor because the responsibility of writing our own unscripted story is terrifying.
But in the 3 a.m. stillness, we realized we are the only ones holding the cage door closed.
We took the terrifying step out of the cage and into the void, confronting a completely indifferent universe. But we flipped the script on nihilism, discovering that an indifferent universe is actually the ultimate permission slip.
It removes the walls and leaves us with an infinite blank canvas.
In standing before that blank canvas, we learned the mechanics of the alchemy of action. We tore down the myth of clarity. We realized that waiting for certainty is just procrastination, and that we must act like we are driving in heavy fog, sending out a signal, taking messy action, because action generates the direction.
We have to embrace our Thursday, that mundane breaking point where we finally refuse to pretend anymore.
And finally, by continually building our own fire in the dark, we transition away from dependency. We create self-generated meaning, becoming a living, breathing threat to stagnation. By no longer needing the system's validation, we render ourselves completely unprogrammable.
It is a profound, demanding teardown of how we construct our daily realities. It asks more of the reader than almost any philosophy we've encountered.
And I want to remind everyone listening, these incredible insights, this intricate, layered deconstruction of modern life, originated directly from the writings and echoes from The Edge with the Lone Wolf. It is the kind of source material that genuinely forces you to stop the car, turn off the deep dive, and ruthlessly examine the architecture of your own reality.
It absolutely demands that level of introspection. And to leave you with something tangible to carry forward from this deep dive, I want to pose a final, lingering thought based on everything we have explored today.
Okay, what is it?
I want you to run a thought experiment. Imagine that you wake up tomorrow morning and an invisible hand has completely wiped away every single label you possess.
Every single one.
Every job title, every social role, every digital metric, and every external piece of validation you currently rely on is gone. You are a completely blank slate, standing alone in the void. What is the very first thing you would choose to build entirely for yourself in the dark?
What an incredible question to end on. What would you build in the dark? Think about that today as you navigate your own Thursday. Stop waiting for the perfect map. Stop waiting for absolute certainty. Send out your signal and just start building. Keep moving forward.